For me, in my experience, and referring to the biggest dream when it came true in early 2017, my dream was on a shelf because I had already gone through for months this process of what I talk about here. And I got to a place where my mind was quiet and life was buoyant and I was happy, even in the midst of my life completely falling apart. It makes no sense, but in that place, I was no longer really focusing on a dream. It was on a shelf, which is why you hear me say that on occasion. My dream was on a shelf. It's already registered in the unseen nature of life. And as long as you're staying out of the way of it coming true, which means you are, which I have a sense that you are stopping or intervening those thoughts that are not helpful, the judgments, being upset over little situations, things like that. You're setting those things aside and keeping your mind more neutral or above. It doesn't matter if you're focusing on your dream or not. You may find moments where you're facing a challenge. At that point, you might want to remind yourself of your dream. But there usually comes a time for all of us in this process that it becomes tedious to think about your dream. Yet you are clear that that is what you want, but it's like you just don't want to think about it. That's usual, that's normal, and it's fine. That means your dream is on a shelf. And Teresa, I think that's what you're going through right now. You're in the cooking time. You are simply in this waiting time where your being is merging with the dream and the unseen nature of life. You are merging, and at some point it will pop from out of the blue. You may or may not notice some things happening related to it. Oftentimes it comes out of nowhere, and sometimes you might notice, wow, I think I'm going to start doing this. This sounds like fun. I'm going to develop this. You might start to notice some abilities you didn't have before, opportunities. Certain things will, and they will feel usual. They won't feel like anything that you've ever not experienced. I don't know how to describe that. It will just feel like a natural progression in your life. So when my big dream came true, and part of my dream, it was not part of my current dream, but I had always wanted the ability to be able to speak without having to read a script. So I'm one of those people that couldn't even write a thank you note. My communication skills, I just didn't have any. And then when my big dream came true, that old desire was one of the many components that also came true. And that led me to what I'm doing here today, to be able to speak and just allow information to flow rather than having to research, write, figure out what I wanted to say and then be nervous the whole time I'm reading. This was just, I didn't even know I had it until I started doing it. So it feels natural. So just maybe pay attention to what's happening around you and any steps that you have taken that can remind you that your dream is in the process of coming true. And notice any steps that start to, or doors that start to open for you. Okay, thank you for that. Let's see, a general sense. Thank you, Donna. So this goes back to the poll. Do you have a focused idea of what you want, or do you have a general sense? So Donna is saying a general sense, feeling richly fulfilled through my senses in everything I do in my dream. Richly fulfilled. So it's the way you feel sounds like that might be the focus of your dream. Correct me or clarify that for me. You're looking for a certain way of being or feeling. And that can come out of any experience, dream. That can be in the midst of chaos. So when I hear that, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing that it doesn't matter what happens in your life. You just want to have that feeling. Or is there something more that you really want? There's something about what's written here that is, I'd love to have you clarify. And maybe not for me, do it for yourself. What do you really want? Okay. Patricia says, I feel very scattered with my dream, as if there are too many things floating around in it. I have been thinking of a lifestyle, but it seems to be too much. Let me think back, Patricia, when my dream came true. It started, remember it was a 8 or 9 month period of time from start to finish. And it all seemed to happen as a result of the final week or 8 to 9 days. But when I started, I was in a place where I didn't have enough money to I wasn't going to soon have enough money to pay my mortgage, pay my taxes, pay our bills. I mean, our mortgage and our taxes were highly, highly taxed here in California. Would be at least $100,000 a year, and that had nothing to do with utilities or whatever it would take to live here. And I had quit my job and was running out of money. And so I'm watching my bank account go down. And so what I felt I wanted or needed, I needed a huge windfall of money. So in a sense, that was registered in the unseen nature of life. And I'm trying to think what came next. I didn't focus on the money. I did when I was paying bills, because I would go into a feeling of panic because running out of money was like the worst thing that could happen to me in my mind. Worse than death. Let me put it that way. The way I was raised, there was money, and money was more important than love, because my parents came through the Depression, and that was instilled in me. Like, money was everything. So this was a big deal for me. The idea of running out of money, I thought how would I survive? So anyway, but when it came to paying my bills every month, I remember that the panic would start to well up in me as I watched my bank account dwindle. And then after I got up to pay my bills, I would automatically go into this buoyant it was just not on my mind. The money wasn't on my mind at all, because I had worked to program my thoughts into something more pleasant. And the feeling that I hung on to was that somehow this was all going to be okay. Somehow I would be okay. Somehow this problem was going to work itself out. I didn't have a clue how. I mean, there was no clue. I mean, if with my 15-year-old education, I'm trying to think, I dropped out of school before it was legal to drop out of school. And eventually I think I went a few years later. I moved to actually Europe and went to high school there. Got my GED when I came home, had a year or two of college, but I basically have no foundational education. So how would someone like me earn enough money to pay this mortgage? I mean, my skills were minimum wage. The only reason I was so highly paid at the job I quit is it was my intuition running what was going on. I relied on that inner knowing, and somehow I held a dream or an idea of where the business belonged, and we just progressively grew to that. So I had to hang on to, not the idea I'm going to get this incredible career, I had to hang on to somehow everything was going to work out. And that kept my mental state, my feeling during the day above neutral. I mean, my life was amazingly glorious during this time. Nothing triggered me. Steve could say anything, it didn't matter. It was like, everything would just wash off of me. Nothing bothered me until I sat down to pay bills. And when something, sometimes in the middle of the night, you'll wake up with that's what I'd listen to inspirational audios. I'd listen to things or read things that would remind me that anything is possible. Remember, the control center's in your mind and your imagination. You are the control center for what happens next. And I think I got off the question. Wait. So the feelings scattered. As if there are too many things floating around in my dreams. So, Patricia, is there something in particular that you would love? You could have this one thing, whether it's, let's say there's the relationship of your dreams, there's the house of your dreams. Is there one that's a little bit like, oh, I just so want that house? If that's the case, your focus more towards the house. That is your big thing. And you do have a knowing that you're sharing that home with someone you love. That's in the dream, but not the dream. It's a little more clear if you can find that little gem of really what makes your heart sing. Maybe it's to be a performing artist. Maybe it's to teach. Maybe you want to do what I'm doing. Whatever it is, maybe it's to have kids. Maybe it's to have your kids out of the house and be free to explore life the way you feel you've been held back. Everybody has a dream in a totally different, it could look, your dream of having a beautiful home and life is entirely different than this person's dream of having a beautiful home and life. None of them match. So even though it may sound the same, if you were to speak it to someone, it's not the same. This is why I really highly suggest not sharing your dream with people. If you're going to do it, share it with someone who's already accomplished it, who really knows the nuances of it. Sometimes, even in a group of similarly minded people, there can be a disconnect. And you'll feel it, this feeling of, why would you dream that? Or, that's stupid, or who you think you're never going to be that person. Sometimes it's best to allow it to just be within you. It'll be in its most fertile ground that way.